Okay, hey, welcome back to the show. I'm Great Grandpa BB. I'm here today with Martha Siegel.
Yes.
And we're here to talk about Ukraine and experiences of the people there right now.
Yes.
What's going on. I got my Ukrainian colors on.
I love it.
For the occasion.
I've got my sunflowers on and my Ukrainian beads from one of my trips.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty fantastic.
It is. This is from an Orthodox church. They're little boxes that open up and you can put your prayers in it. And there's a beautiful Orthodox church in the city that I go to in Ukraine.
Okay, yeah.
So
Tell us about that. You've been there quite a few times.
Yes. I've been 18 times in the past 23 years.
Gotcha.
I am an occupational therapist, and I got the call to mission work in the fall of 98, and I made my first trip in February of 99.
Okay.
Snow was so deep, it was like Dr. Zhivago.
Yeah.
So the village that I go to is called Nagy-Dubron. It was a formerly Hungarian village because when the borders changed with all the wars and whatnot, they've retained their Hungarian roots. So when I go, I'm in the western part of Ukraine, which is right now away from the fighting.
Yeah.
They have yet to see fighting. They are having air raids. They are happening on a regular basis.
Yeah.
The orphanage where I provide occupational therapy, they prefer to be called a children's home. Sounds a little nicer than orphanage.
Right.
But they currently have taken some of their girls and moved them to Hungary, some of the handicapped girls, but most of the girls are still there. So we're talking over 80 children in a children's home within the borders of Ukraine.
Because I heard there's somewhere around 4 million refugees somewhere
Correct.
around there right now. Yeah.
And right now there are 12 refugee families at the children's home that have come from the east.
Okay.
More coming in every day.
Yeah.
Every day.
Wow.
The need is still great. We are able, our organization, the organization I represent is called SARA, Sharing America's Resources Abroad.
Okay.
It's part of the Heartland Conference of the United Church of Christ. We just had a board meeting yesterday.
Heartland is in this part of Ohio?
It's all of Ohio, Northern Kentucky, and West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
So it's a big conference. It's a big conference.
Yeah.
But we had a board meeting yesterday via Zoom. So one of the girls from Ukraine, her name is Olga, and she lives in the Donbass region, which is where the fighting is going on.
Yeah.
She zoomed in.
Yeah.
It was so good to see her. She's doing well. She says she's safe, but I think that's all relative right now.
Okay.
But she's one of the girls that we provided surgery for here in America. She came to America and had scoliosis surgery.
And so she's over there right now, and she was able to...
right now.
Wow.
And she was able to zoom in. We also had... two of our board members that live in Hungary that were on the call yesterday.
Yeah.
It's just horrific. What you're seeing on television is the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, I'd imagine so.
It's horrific. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just as far as not even just the fighting part of it, but like the refugees and just being like kind of just strewn about, like living in like warehouses, spaces where they don't really have accommodations at all. And there's just so many people like just... abroad. I heard yesterday that a lot of people are just going back to Ukraine just because it's very hard to live that way.
You're absolutely right. There are several hundred families leaving Poland and going back to living underground in Ukraine.
Okay.
Because it's what they know.
Yeah, right.
I think about it as an American. What if I was thrust into a country where I didn't know the language?
Yeah.
I didn't know the money system. I didn't know how to access anything. How could I live?
Yeah, exactly. It's like moving, even like Americans moving to Mexico or something.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And it's, I don't know Spanish well enough to get around.
Right.
You know?
And I don't know any Ukrainian. I know a little Hungarian because that's what they speak at the village and the towns that I go to.
Yeah.
But I don't know any Ukrainian.
Yeah.
And Ukrainian is different than Russian, despite what everybody's been told. Yes, they both use the Cyrillic alphabet. Yes, they both sound like they're fighting whenever they talk.
Right, yeah.
But it's just the nature, it's just the cadence of their speech.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Language is kind of amazing for that,
Yes.
like as far as like phonetically, like what it sounds like to other people who don't know what's going on and what's being said,
Correct. And I guess what I really would like to stress in this podcast and in future speaking engagements that I have is the fortitude of the Ukrainian people.
Yeah.
They've always been Ukrainian people. They have never been Russian people. They've always been their own culture. And I said, there must be something passed down through the DNA that just gives them such faith and fortitude. Yeah. They love their country.
Yeah.
They truly love being Ukrainians. And
it's type of a sovereign freedom that's built inside people, I think.
Yes.
Just probably all around the world too. And when you're put up in that type of situation, you know, it really shines.
Yes.
What you're made of and how strong you are in the face of adversity.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, I don't know. In America, we don't have any concept of that in recent times.
No.
You know?
No, we don't.
It really hasn't been affronted to us since World War II or even Vietnam, maybe. But and then after that, it just seems like, there's a certain amount of trauma that happens since 1945 and the invention of like a nuclear bomb, say, right?
Yes.
Where everyone has this kind of psychological in the back of their mind kind of trauma that's, you know, occurs because of the fact that, hey, like we're kind of always in a war now because the possibility of just us waking up and not being here is real.
It is very real. And you know, our organization, we stray away from anything political.
Yeah.
We really do. And that's the best way to operate under this situation. But I have to remind people on a daily basis almost, we are not that far from Russia.
No, not really.
Alaska.
Yeah, right?
Alaska. I mean...
Probably a stone's throw.
A stone's throw, exactly. One well-placed nuclear missile to Alaska, and you're right. Yeah. We won't be waking up tomorrow to the freedom and the joys that we all share.
Yeah.
And the people of Ukraine have lived under this threat for the last 8 years. I was in Ukraine during the Crimea, when they went into Crimea.
In 2014?
Yes, I was there.
Wow.
And I had people here stateside that were saying, you're crazy for going. And I kept saying, Ukraine is a big country. That's way on the other side of the country.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect what I do. And it did not.
Yeah.
It's a different story today.
Right. Yeah. The entire country is...
They want the entire country.
Okay. Yeah.
And this business of saying the Ukrainians were perpetrating genocide against the Russians is just false information.
Right.
That was not happening. I mean, look at the sheer numbers of Ukrainians that have been killed for no apparent reason.
And that, and not to get too much into politics or anything, but like, what was it, 2008, there was like a NATO kind of accord thing happening where they're trying to bring Ukraine into NATO.
Correct.
And Russia did not like that at all.
Not at all. And
then in 2014, there was like a coup happening, and I believe it was the Americans helping on one side, and then
helping with supplies and support, but not boots on the ground.
Yeah. Creating a coup necessarily.
What I did see in 2014, we visited a mental health hospital in the western part of Ukraine because we had some girls that lived there that had been from the children's home.
Yeah.
And I saw these young men all dressed alike, just walking around almost zombie-like. And I asked my director, I said, what is going on? He goes, oh, those are the soldiers from Crimea. They bring them here for rest.
Oh, wow.
They look to be 16 years old.
Wow.
You know, 18 at the best. And they had never known war. These were kids.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure.
But this has been going on for 8 years.
Yeah.
Just inching their way in. They call it a sword fight. We call it a different thing here in America, but I don't know if the podcast we can use those words. But it's that kind of a match.
I think we get the implication.
Yeah. Yeah. But my work in Ukraine, it's very important. I had one of the workers from the children's home messaging me today. she's been sending me pictures of current pictures of the girls, what they're doing today. And she sent this picture of little Anna, who I have not seen since 2018. She's got this paper flowers she made in her hands, and she's just looking up at the camera. So I put it out on Facebook today, and I said, Anna at the Good Samaritan Home says thank you for your prayers and support.
Yeah.
Because our organization is getting support in, we are getting medical supplies in, we are getting food in. But there's a real threat to that home right now today. I heard about it today from the administrator that they could lose the building.
Wow.
The building is housing 80 girls and 12 refugee families. But the government could come in and say, we're taking this.
Right, yeah.
Even though it's church run, it's private.
Right.
You know.
At this point, it's fair game.
Exactly. Yeah. There's many refugees in the city of Mukachevo, which is a close city. Uskarad also, which is the capital of Transcarpathia, which is the region I go to.
Okay.
Inundated with refugees.
Wow.
One of the orthopedic surgeons, pediatric orthopedic surgeon, sent word to us that they received a 5-year-old boy from the east that was missing his arms and legs.
Wow.
So think about that. If you were in America, you'd immediately be rushed off to a children's hospital and fitted for prosthesis, and all the psychological care, all the care you needed would be happening. Mm-hmm. He's at a loss. What can I do?
Yeah.
What can I do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the doctors are none of the men can leave Ukraine. They gotta
fight.
They are there to fight, or if they're physicians, they're there to tend to those. And it's not just the wounded from the war. Mm-hmm. There are other healthcare issues that are your day-to-day healthcare issues that need to be taken care of.
Yeah, yeah.
And getting medications in is very, very important. So we've been working on that.
The whole logistics of war itself is got to be insane. Trying to get food and medicine and
correct.
All of the supplies, even bullets and all the
right.
Ammunitions of war.
But I'll tell you what, those Ukrainian farmers. I'm a farmer's daughter.
Yeah.
And I've posted on Facebook, I've never been prouder to be a farmer's daughter than I see these farmers, some with a newer John Deere tractor, some with the old Soviet era tractors, out there pulling those tanks on home. And I'm like, you go, guys.
Yeah.
And the women, there was just a picture on the news of this whole battalion of Ukrainian soldiers, all females, that fell into the Russian, they were prisoners of war. Mm-hmm. So they shaved their heads to humiliate them. They said, you cannot humiliate us.
Wow, right.
We are Ukrainian. And the fortitude,
Yeah, yeah.
But they need our prayers, they need our support. They need whatever we can share with them at this time. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. They really do. Because they would help their brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
You were there, and I had the opportunity to speak a couple weeks back in Sandusky, and I will be speaking again this Sunday, same location.
Yeah, with Marcy Captor.
Yeah, right. And Marcy, mentioned, and she said, Marty, and I'm sure you've experienced this, and I have. They will give you the last parcel of food they have in their house if you've come to visit. Mm-hmm. And not think twice about it. I remember visiting this family. They were all special needs people, very down on their luck, sharing like a one-bedroom house. It was a sister and her 2 brothers, and they were all of marginal intelligence, and they were surviving. But as we were leaving and getting on the van to go, this sweet little lady was collecting walnuts in her yard and giving each of us a walnut. Mm-hmm. She had to give us something, to say thank you for our visit.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know that the camera can't see this, but if you see that picture in there on the living room wall of the mountains, of the Carpathian mountains there in the corner.
Okay, yeah.
There was a little boy in the village that they thought there was something drastically wrong with him because he didn't pay attention in school, and they asked me if I would evaluate him. Well, I don't know the language, but I got a translator, and we discovered he was deaf.
Oh, wow.
So we got him hearing aids.
Yeah.
And he's fine. Tomas. His name is Tomas.
Wow.
The next year that I came back, his grandmother and mother presented me with that picture. So it's just a poster, but I had it matted and framed because that's how they are so grateful for whatever help they're given.
Yeah. and that's kind of the humanity of the situation.
It
right?
is. It is.
The way that we can show I don't know, love or support between humanity a lot of times is through, material things that,
Correct.
don't material things in and of themselves, but then like the meaning behind them, right?
Correct.
And
yes.
it's I mean the entire history of how we use debt and how we use money as almost just like tokens almost
Right.
of appreciation.
Right.
Or as like, I want to be in your debt, and so now, or you be in my debt, and then so we have like a bond almost.
Yes. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing that we do, I guess, as far
Right.
as that's concerned. But then on the other side, you were talking about the 16 and 18-year-old soldiers being involved in this, and I mean, a lot of that is, conditioning as far as just nationality almost,
Right. Right.
And that's a huge burden on the world right now. Is like we're in these like growing pains as like a world where like the archaic structures of these like governments or nationalities or whatever you want to call them, the cultures are great. Like the actual practices of the people are great. The people themselves are great. Even the Russian people are great people.
Correct. Oh, absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
And that's something that is a big deal right now too, is a lot of people xenophobia against Russian people in America or
Right.
around the world,
Right.
who don't understand that it's not the Russian people who are causing this.
And the Russian people are kept very much in the dark.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
definitely.
been brought to light so much through the news media and different messages that I get from my friends over there. We know who is to blame for this.
Yeah.
And it is not the Russian people. It is, I hate to say this, but it is a brainwashed society.
Right. Yeah. Here in America, yeah, very much so.
Yeah, it's just a brainwashed society. They only believe, they don't ferret out the truth. They hear one thing and they believe that.
Or they just jump to conclusions.
Well, look at
yeah.
And look at all the Russians that have given up and gone to Ukraine and said, "We will help you now."
Yeah.
We had no idea we were sent here to kill you.
Yeah.
And they didn't. I truly believe. And as a woman of faith and one that practices Christianity, I have heard more pastors in the past several weeks not only pray for Ukraine, but pray for President Putin.
Yeah.
I actually had a really interesting conversation just this weekend with a lady who was Buddhist.
Okay. Yeah.
Very interesting. And it's a way of life for her. It is her faith. And she said, in the Buddhist faith, the Buddhist life that I try to practice, we believe there is good in everyone and everything. Mm-hmm. And she said, so I pray for the good in Putin to manifest.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, great. We all are praying for that also.
Yeah, because people with that type of power at their disposal, it's detrimental to the psychological makeup of that person in a lot of ways. It's they talk about even having a lot of money, it has like a certain amount of like brain damage to your empathy.
Right.
And your ability to even like communicate in a humane way, so to say.
Well, isn't it interesting that even his advisors are afraid to tell him how bad things are?
Yeah.
They're afraid to tell him for the repercussions that they could have for failing.
Definitely. And that's what happens probably in wars throughout, historically, I remember reading about like the first time that an actual leader, right, like got remote information from a war during war times was the Civil War, I believe.
Oh.
Where it was like a telegraph, from the battlefront to the president. And like that had, like, if you were the leader, you were usually on the battlefield itself.
Correct.
Up to that point.
Right. But that's like, I'm also very, very involved in theater. And was involved with the musical production of 1776, which is
Okay.
very, very true to what actually was happening.
Yeah.
And the young man would run in with the letters from the front from General Washington and slap it down on the Congress desk, and they would read what was happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, that could be weeks after it had happened.
Easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And now with social media the way it is,
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we're hearing...
We can see the protesters in Russia, downtown, being arrested on camera, like almost live.
Correct. Yes. Well, that's when, you know, we were all on the edge because, you know, the threat was there, the threat was there, the threat was there.
Yeah.
And I go to bed rather early on nights that I have to work, and my phone rang, and the first thing out of my friend's mouth was, I know you hate to be woken up when you've gone to bed and you have to work the next day, but you will be so upset by morning if you don't know this news now.
Right.
And that's when I said, oh my God, they have bombed.
Yeah.
And she said, yes, you better turn your TV on now.
And that's the other, yeah.
And, you know, my son who lives downstairs, he heard me stomping around up here and making a cup of coffee, and he heard the TV blaring, and he texted me. You know, we live in the same house, but he texted me. He says, Mom, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm not okay. And that's, you know, right now, the people that I know and love and care about in Ukraine, right now they're safe because they're on the other side of the mountains. They're on the other side of the Carpathians.
Nice.
The Russians couldn't make it through the Carpathians during World War I and II. I doubt that they're going to make it through now because they call them the hedgehogs.
Okay.
The things to stop the tanks.
Aren't those in the rivers themselves?
Yes. Luke and I have both, my son and I have both seen those several times over. They're big boulder-like pyramid-shaped rocks that are in the rivers. And I've been on those mountain roads.
Yeah.
They're not passable by tanks.
Yeah. No.
And that's my fervent prayer, that they burn themselves out and they just go home. They just tuck their tail and go home.
That would be, that'd be the best case scenario, obviously.
It would be.
Yeah.
And the hundreds of people that have died, once again, in my faith, I know they're in a better place. But those that have been left behind are not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
They're left to mourn and left to rebuild. I saw, I don't know if it was on a TikTok. It must have been because I follow a lot of my friends. And this old babushka lady in a little village in the middle of nowhere in eastern Ukraine, her son had been shot and was laying dead in the yard. So she pulled her rug out of her house to cover his body and then put pallets on top of it to keep the dogs away.
Wow.
I mean, we all know the people are starving. Well, if the people are starving, so are the animals.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And I thought, to be that old woman who couldn't bury her son, she wasn't physically capable.
Yeah.
But to protect his body was what was foremost in her mind that day. It's very sobering.
Yeah, it is.
It's very sobering.
That's a lot.
And that's one of how many hundreds of stories people will have to tell when they come out of this. Yeah.
The atrocities being committed right now are numerous, and just in America we haven't focused on or seen a lot of it in our media in a very long time.
Right.
Really, maybe since the early 90s with the Gulf War.
I think you're right.
I mean, like, all the wars that have happened from 9/11 for the last 20 years, you know, I mean, America's been dropping how many bombs every year, you know.
Right. Well, you know, that's very interesting, because I'm 67. I make no bones about how old I am. So I grew up with the Vietnam conflict. You didn't dare call it a war.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
The Vietnam conflict.
Gotcha.
So every night on a black and white television, what did I see? But pictures of people shooting at each other. And my niece, we went to see Private Ryan when it came out. And she was very disturbed by it. And I sat there and, it was unnerving, but I wasn't disturbed by the images.
Right.
And we talked about it afterwards. I said, you know, I really think seeing it every night on television on the 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock or whatever news we were watching after dinner hardened me.
It does. Yeah. I've heard of different stories as far as like empathy decreasing based off of or your reaction to horrific events. There was like even on the lower level, there was this. I saw a story of a scientist talking about, she's getting her PhD. She's working in the labs. She has to go in and basically kill like 100 mice like every morning when she wakes up for this experiment, right?
Yeah.
And at first it's just horrifying to her, but then she's doing it every day for a month. And then she, takes like a couple months off. She has to go do something, comes back to it. And she realized that like she had gotten used to it because like the first day back, she was horrified again. And she didn't even realize that she had gotten used to it the first time.
Yeah.
But same stories, like I'm sure in the medical field, right?
Right.
I mean, like seeing somebody's worst day 10 times a day.
Exactly.
I mean, like for those people, that's a life-changing event. But for you, that's just like, that's 9 o'clock,
Yeah. It never gets old, but it never gets, how do I want to say this? I have been in several situations where patients have died.
Yeah.
To me, it's an honor at that passing, just like it's the honor to be there if when a baby takes its first breath. But it's also an honor to be there when they take their last.
Yeah.
It's a very pivotal spiritual moment,
Definitely.
But I also, once again, with my faith, know that there's better places.
Right.
That's truly what I believe. But to bring this back to Ukraine, the suffering of those left behind is almost... My one of the other board members that has traveled with me several times to Ukraine, she and I were talking this morning, and she said, "Does it still feel unreal to you?" And I said, "On days it does, because we feel so far removed." I was packed and ready to go when 9/11 hit. I was due to leave the 17th.
Wow.
And I was going. Well, guess what? The State Department told me, "No, you're not."
Right.
I was ready to go. I thought, if I go, they won. If I don't go, they won.
Yeah.
I'm not scared. I want to go. But the State Department said, "We will let you go. We won't guarantee you can come back."
Right. Yeah. And that was right after 9/11, 2001.
Yeah, it was. I was supposed to go to Ukraine on the 17th of September.
Okay.
I was packed and ready to go.
Wow.
And I remember the visceral reaction I had to seeing those Twin Towers coming down.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Because when I saw the plane hit the second tower, I was at work, but we had televisions on one of the living units. So somebody said, "You got to go see what's happening." And I went down. I saw that this plane had hit this tower. Well, when the plane hit the second tower, it was like I was watching instant replay. That's exactly what I thought I was seeing.
Yeah.
And then I realized it wasn't, and I literally slid to my knees. I was like, "Oh my God, we are under attack." Yeah. We have never been under attack.
Yeah. Not in our lifetimes.
No,
I mean, as far as what a modern America looks like.
Right. So that fearful time of 9/11, multiply that times 6 weeks.
Right. Yeah. And just buildings coming down, buildings that like
housing families.
Right. Yeah.
Bombing hospitals, bombing theaters where people are hiding to be away from the bombs, to be safe. What is the point in killing civilians? That's what I don't understand. I don't think we are meant to understand it either.
Yeah, it's a childish. It's very childish the way that people have war, and like what we were talking about before, the leaders who initiate these things are initiating almost just like past grudges, we talk about the historical ramifications of these countries' history, but really like the people involved have no historical beef with each other, so to say.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Yes, exactly.
It's more of the I don't know, ideology of like we're this sovereign nation and this sovereign nation miffed us 20 years ago, and so we have to establish dominance and whatever, like that type of power struggle is it feels like we're at a very like adolescent age in humanity, even though we've been here for what we think is a long time. we're going through these like growing pains for sure, you know.
Yes. Yes.
Where like what is the other side of this, I wonder.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like what does the world look like when it's run by a decentralized small groups of people who act like together more so.
Correct.
Than
Yes.
like these like large institutions that think that they should have power, and for some reason the people like follow that still, because that's kind of the way that it's always worked as far as the last a couple thousand years at least, you know.
Yeah.
But like trying to find the strategy out of this, you know, like that's going to be very difficult, and it's not going to be something that happens overnight.
Right, and it has to end where the Russian people can save face.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not the Russian people.
Right, exactly.
It's not. I mean, there's the story that is circulated about the woman living in Ukraine who called her mother, and her mother wouldn't believe anything she was telling her.
Yeah.
Because their news is so censored.
Mm-hmm.
It is so censored.
Wow.
You know,
the news in Ukraine is censored?
No. The
In
news
Russia.
in Russia is so censored. Oh, no.
Gotcha.
No,
Yeah.
Ukraine is not, because they are a free nation.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and they've always been Ukraine.
It seems like
And you know, it's like America. Like in Ukraine, in Western Ukraine, you've got your Slovaks, you've got your Hungarians, you've got your Poles, you've got all these different nationalities. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the doctors that I work with, that he and his partner have a clinic now that's funded by a Christian society, and they no longer work for the government hospitals, but they have their own clinic.
Yeah.
He said, you know, I've been Hungarian, I'll always be Hungarian. I've been Ukrainian, I'll always be Ukrainian. I've been Czech, and I've been Romanian, and I've never left my house. Because he talks about how the borders have changed.
And when it comes down to it, where do these labels even?
Exactly.
They're pointless in a sense that, like, okay, well, are you a free people of the world? Okay, well, let's start there.
Right,
like,
and you know, I'm not a Native American.
Yeah.
Are you Native American at all?
No.
No, I am not indigenous. I am German. I'm German American.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. We're all immigrants here.
Exactly. Except for those in the West that got moved from our East.
Yeah.
To the West.
Definitely. Yeah.
Those indigenous people.
Yeah. The history of this country is definitely checkered.
Yes.
In a great many ways.
And I may have shared this story with you before, but you know, in my very early travels to Ukraine, I was so naive. I went in February of '99, and then I went that following summer of '99. And we were in a true Ukrainian area. It was not Hungarian anymore. And I made the mistake of asking a woman about when she was Russian.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And in her very thick Ukrainian accent, she said to me, "Well, we were never Russian. We were Ukrainian. We've always been Ukrainian. The Russians just controlled us for a period of time."
Yeah.
And I thought, wow. What a history lesson.
Yeah.
What a history lesson. And I was embarrassed that I felt that I had insulted her. Mm-hmm. But that's us in America. We need to broaden our horizons. I mean, I have people still asking, well, isn't Ukraine part of Russia? And I revert back to that story. No.
Yeah.
Ukraine is older than Russia, actually, historically speaking.
Yeah.
It was around before Russia.
It makes
was
sense,
established.
Just from the fact of like the Mediterranean area being kind of like the birthplace of agriculture, so to say, and like what rich soils would be more in that region than northern. Like, I mean, in Russia, it always seems like it would be so hard. It's like a dandelion or a weed living in like concrete or something, you know, to me. Well, like, how do you even thrive in that type of, space?
So when it was the Soviet Union, and Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, it was Ukraine, part of the Soviet Union. So they had what was known as collective farms.
Yeah.
So you lived in your village, but you might be a farmer because you worked on the collective farm.
Yeah.
Well, after the Cold War ended, and it was no longer part of the Soviet Union.
Well, the Soviet Union disassembled, essentially, right?
Right. The Soviets filled truckloads of the soil from the collective farms to take back to Russia.
From Ukraine.
From Ukraine, because Ukraine was the breadbasket. Because Ukraine has the richest farm soil.
Yeah.
They are the biggest wheat and corn producers in most of Eastern Europe, and I'm not good at knowing facts and numbers, but I do know that.
Yeah.
They stripped all of the wiring and plumbing out of the factories, leaving them barren. So, in that poem that I had read about a land stripped, that's what I was referring to. Mm-hmm. The factories were left barren. The farms were left in disarray. And Ukraine has come out of those birthing pains. Because somebody said to me just today, they said, well, those buildings that are being bombed look like it was quite a thriving, beautiful country. And I said, back up.
Yeah.
It's a baby country.
Right. Yeah. Those are all new buildings.
Most of the ones were still Soviet era. Those big high-rise apartment buildings.
Gotcha.
I think that's why they fall still, because they're so old. But yes, Ukraine was coming into it was crawling. It was now walking.
Yeah.
The past few years that I've been going, there's automotive factories. There's medical factories. There's other kind of factories coming into Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And people are working. I mean, when I started going there in 99, if you can even imagine this, the unemployment was 80%.
Wow.
A physician working for the government, still under that socialized thought, was making $60 a month.
Wow.
You'd be hard-pressed to sit in a doctor's office for $60 a visit.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Now that has changed. They are working and making money. There is free enterprise. But, 99 wasn't that far after the Cold War had ended.
And it's not that long ago, even today. Yeah. I'm pretty sure there was a Yugoslavian incident that happened around that same time period.
Well,
too.
I know this won't show on the camera, but you can see how things were gray and dark in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Now there's color. The buildings are painted in bright color. Things are being built. This is a brand new children's home being built, and that was in 2008.
Yeah.
So, the happy faces of these children, I'll let you take that. You might.
Okay.
We had a photojournalist that went with us one year, and that was his. But that's what I've seen, and now it's like we're back to square one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The rebuilding.
Yeah.
The rebuilding is going to be.
Yeah.
But you've heard of the countries that are stepping forward and saying, one country said they'll rebuild that maternity hospital. Another country said they will rebuild that theater. They've made that commitment to the country.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to be hard for Russia to deal with too, because that's going to bring, as far as the East-West socialist capitalist divide thing that's been happening, Russia wants Ukraine to be part of them still.
Correct.
And so if the West is helping them rebuild, that just makes them want to be more a part of the West. Essentially, it'll become part of the West at that point. Right. Just because the money that's there is from the West rebuilding it.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. They're making it worse on themselves overall.
Right.
That's...
It was not very thought out.
No. Mm-mm.
It was a knee-jerk response.
Yeah, and it's been brewing over time, true, as well. But obviously, no war is going to have a good outcome.
No,
there aren't any winners in that kind of game.
No, there are no winners. And then I wanted to say to you, isn't it interesting that we have rules for war?
Right.
It's war.
Yeah.
Isn't the old saying, all's fair at love and war? Yeah. When I hear them saying, well, they're committing war crimes, isn't war in and of itself a crime?
You would hope so. That seems to be the baseline, everything that they're doing in a war is a crime in normal society.
Correct. Yes. Good way to put it, because I just can't understand how they keep saying, well, he's going to be brought up on war crimes. Well, duh.
Right.
Murder times 1,000 times 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah. The way that we comprehend things in large numbers and scale changes.
Yeah.
If you kill 14,000 people versus this guy down the street that killed one person, it's somehow incredibly different thing, but it's not, you know.
Right.
It's one of them's an atrocity, and it's hard to it's the same thing with money too, almost, where like you say that it's like, oh well, this guy has $28 billion. It's like, oh well, okay, you know, like, but I can't comprehend how long it would take me to make that kind of money.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it would take me like 10,000 years working like I'm doing to create that kind of money. And in that kind of perspective, you're like, wow, that seems like a crime as well.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like,
And now all the billionaires whose money has and their assets is all frozen.
Right.
You know, like one gentleman, he only has $1 million to live on.
Well, you know, sing a sad song, I guess.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I can't even fathom that.
No.
I can't even. I mean, the stories. I mean, my first year, the very first trip there in February of '99, we were in the laundry room of the Children's Hospital in Mukachevo, which, by the way, is a brand new children's hospital now with a brand new laundry room.
Yeah.
And we were standing in water. And I was listening to a translation going on over my shoulder while other stuff was going on. And what I heard was 7 women were electrocuted standing in that water doing the laundry for the hospital and died.
That's insane.
You know what they were working for? They were working for $15 a month and a bucket of food scraps at the end of every week. What did we do? Our organization bought them new washing machines, built them a new wash house. Because that's what you do. You help each other.
Yeah, exactly.
You would be hard-pressed to find those working conditions here in America. Because, you know, I've taken the heat about, well, don't you think you ought to help your fellow Americans? Well, yeah, we have a welfare system. I think our fellow Americans, yeah, there are people here hurting. I'm not denying that.
Oh, definitely.
I am not denying that.
Yeah.
But I felt called to do this work, and it has made a better person out of me, I believe. I don't know where I'd be without this work, really.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
That's what it's all about, though, you know?
Yeah.
What is money but just a medium of exchange and resource management, and the responsibility there to take care of people on a whole, right? Like, how do we make it so that people aren't in dire straits, essentially?
Yes.
And that seems to be the goal and the outlining, like, future of everything that you're pushing forward, everything that we need to push forward. For people in America, for people in Ukraine, for people in Russia, for people all over the world.
Correct, yes.
Because they're essentially people who are living, breathing, emotional, passionate people who all have the same dreams as everybody else, you know?
Right.
And, you know, and try, I don't, it's extremely hard when there's, like, archaic systems in the way, you know, where it's just like, well, we're used to doing stuff this way, so this is how we do it, and we need to be able to have the courage to change and to move forward. Even though right now it sounds insane to try to do that, you know. It's like the old story of you know, like the knight versus the dragon, who just seems like, how are you going to defeat this dragon? You know, it's like 100 times the size of you. But there are weaknesses, and blaring ones that we're witnessing right now, even. Right. And that's the weaknesses in you know, the so-called dragon that we're fighting right now, essentially.
Yes, and if that dragon that we're fighting is brought down, I could see harmony between Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, definitely.
I absolutely could.
Wow.
I mean,
yeah, because
I really
the people
could.
there, I mean, like, it seems like the Russian people are standing up for the Ukrainian people.
They are. Because they were all, when they were Soviets, even though they were different nationalities.
Mm-hmm.
They were just like you and I we're all Americans, but we're different nationalities.
Definitely, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know,
and it used to be a bigger deal in America,
right?
Like nativism versus like, even when what was it? Man, my mind's blanking. Ireland. Irish people came over in the early 1900s. I mean, they were looked considerably down upon.
Right.
They weren't native people, so to say.
Right. And I've had being from Bellevue, everybody assumes that Bellevue is an all Italian town.
Yeah.
We are not. We are 50% German.
Yeah.
There is a German settlement south of Bellevue that even spoke German up until, I was in 8th grade in 1968. I had friends from that community whose grandparents still only spoke German. Wow. They knew English.
Yeah, for sure.
But they still only spoke German. That was...
because it was comfortable.
Exactly.
And that's how far removed we are. Like,
right.
A couple generations, we think that, like, wherever we are, we feel like it's happened for a long time. But it's like, none of this has occurred until just recently.
And we're all just people.
Right, exactly. And that's the underlying... And
it doesn't matter what your culture, it doesn't matter what your background, you look at things differently, but you're people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that's what's so wonderful. It's what I love about going to Ukraine is they just accept you for who you are. Mm-hmm. They just accept you for who you are.
Because that's the beautiful part of people. Yes. Is their differences.
Yes.
Essentially.
Exactly.
Exactly. Music. I'm a musician, and so I always look towards different cultures' folk music a lot, as far as like, what do they traditionally like to do? What are their scale structures? Like how do they play? Like what, like the even the dances that go along with them are so amazing to me, You
would love hearing some of my Roma music. Gypsy's a bad word.
Right, okay.
Gypsy's a bad word. It's Roma.
Okay.
Gypsy is you don't use that word. It's calling them a very bad name.
Gotcha.
But it's like that. The Roma people in Eastern Europe have difficulties because they look different and they live differently.
Yeah.
But their music is soul-wrenching. It's beautiful. It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
But the Hungarians, the Ukrainians, they all embrace that Roma music.
Oh,
they reach out and help the Roma people.
Nice.
There's Roma congregations. There's Roma villages. Not too very long ago, the Roma people weren't allowed in state schools, but they are now. Okay. But those are the people that are probably really struggling. They don't have basements to hide in. They live in little hovels.
Yeah.
And I often think about the Roma congregations that I know there and how they must be struggling at this time.
Yeah.
Because they are very much dependent on others helping them.
Wow. And it's those types of things that even when there's divisions between people like that, right? Like the music or the food or their culture can tie people together. Yes. Because even though those are different, like we understand the similarities between us. There was a sci-fi book that I read recently. It's called Speaker of the Dead, but Orson Scott Card wrote it, and it was basically the kind of the principle was like he's like on an alien planet, and trying to communicate with different species and different things like that, where he brings forth this idea of like different levels of communication, he's like. He's like on Earth, obviously, we have different countries and different languages, but we understand that we're doing the same things and we communicate in the same ways. And communication is possible at that point, And then he talks about different other like alien species and like how it becomes impossible to even know how to communicate with them. Right? Because they're so incredibly different, we can't even recognize the abilities almost of like how to to make connections, which I find fascinating. I don't know, it gives a lot of perspective. I like how sci-fi can weave bigger, almost political narratives into structures that aren't so direct, right?
Right. You see the similarities.
Yes.
In a fantasy realm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the way that people believe that, different cultures like that are like entirely different species is not true. It's like
yes, I know what you're saying. Yes,
like we're all exactly the same. Basically.
Exactly.
Like we're like on the communication level on that scale. Like we have different languages, but they're almost identical. Like when you look at a wider scope.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's basically what I'm trying to say, I guess. But I mean, so many sci-fi authors, Twilight Zone, way ahead of his time, and talking about nuclear politics and things like that, how it affects real people,
Yeah, and the nuclear that threat right now.
Yes, exactly.
Like I said, one well-placed missile into Alaska, and
yeah, that's true. And then we're in it essentially.
Yeah. The miles there are very short.
Yeah.
And is it the Bering Strait? Is that what it is between Alaska and Russia? What is that body of water called?
That sounds correct.
Yeah, because I know I had an uncle that was stationed up in the Aleutians.
Okay.
And talked about how close they actually were to Russia at that time.
And regardless of how close we are physically, like it's a small planet, regardless of where we are on the planet, it's a small planet.
Exactly.
Carl Sagan was famous with the tiny blue dot.
Yes,
right?
yes.
A picture he got a satellite to take from around Neptune, I believe. And it just happened, like they had like a 2-hour window to take this photograph, and he was able to convince NASA at the time. It's like, we need to take that photograph. And they're like, why? He's like, you'll figure it out later. We just need to do it, But I mean, he was a very large intellect and the ability to talk on broad spectrums of culture and the narrative of us in the universe itself and how incredibly small we are,
Exactly. And that's why we need to help each other.
Yes, exactly.
Because this planet will not survive.
Yeah.
If we don't help each other.
Yeah. And ultimately, and that's what we're all here for, essentially.
Right.
I mean, every job that we have on the planet is essentially just helping other people, I think. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm going to move this thing from here to here, and it's going to help people by this, It's like, that's every job there is, I feel like,
Right.
There isn't a job that exists that isn't that, And so, I don't know, people become very myopic and very narrow focused on the job at hand, which is necessary at times,
Monotropism.
You're right. Yeah. And put the podcast in the ears, zone out, and work for however many hours, and then go home. And sometimes that's what you got to do just to get it done, just to get things done and get into the zone, and you get a lot of good work done that way.
Yeah. Well, I have actually found that I was glued to the news. Glued to the news.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sleeping.
It's easy to do.
I wasn't being very productive. Mm-hmm. And so I like to do crafts. I like to make jewelry. I like to do different things. And I have a studio in the basement. Mm-hmm. And so I just told myself, enough is enough. You were allowed to watch news from 6:30 to 7.
Yeah, right.
Unless somebody tells you need to go see this now. And I go down into my zone, and you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. I've been putting on old sitcoms like Designing Women or something.
Right. Yeah,
and I'm just listening while I'm working.
Yeah.
And I am so productive, and I'm feeling healthier about it.
Yeah.
Also, the podcast, I'm speaking next Sunday. We are raising support for Ukraine because when this all happened, the emotion I had was helpless.
Yeah.
I felt helpless. I can't do anything. I can't be there to help them. I don't know the language well enough to console. Mm-hmm. I'm an occupational therapist, so I don't really do life-saving medical intervention. There's nothing. I felt helpless. I don't feel so helpless now because we're raising support, we're getting funds there, we are collecting supplies. We actually have a doctor in Philadelphia that was just most recently there in September. She does plastic surgery for like kids with cleft palate and cleft lip. Mm-hmm. She just got medical supplies into Mukachevo, and we're like, how did you do that? The seaports are closed. Odessa and Mariupol are closed. I don't know how they did it, but they flew them into Poland and got them there.
Yeah, yeah.
And she said, supplies you collect, get them to Philadelphia, we'll get them there. That's people helping people.
Yeah.
That's what needs to happen. We throw away so much stuff in this country.
Oh my God, yeah. Food.
You know, yeah. Somebody said, well, on our board meeting yesterday, some company, like one of these big dental conglomerates, they changed logos. So all their new toothbrushes had to have a new logo on it. So they gave us 800 toothbrushes.
Wow.
You might think that sounds like nothing.
Right.
There's a lot of things you can do with a toothbrush besides brush your teeth.
Right.
800 toothbrushes are something they don't have to buy.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's not something they all thought to grab when they fled either.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I know I'm talking about toothbrushes, but seriously, it's every little essential thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you're kicked out of your house, or I mean, think about if your house burned down, right? Like, right. Where are you gonna go? Like you have to buy all new stuff. You have to start completely from scratch, essentially.
Exactly.
And everything that you take for granted.
That's what these people are having to do, because you saw those buildings.
Yeah.
What is left?
Yeah.
Nothing. Mm-mm. Nothing. They are bombed out shells. Nothing is, and those people didn't have that much to begin with.
Right.
They're very much minimalists.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's the entire act of it. And, you talking about just being almost incredibly just stressed out or or psychologically having trauma about it. Because, like, how do you cope with the stress of dealing with something that's happening to people that you know overseas, and there's nothing you can do about it? And then, being proactive, like trying to take action, like that becomes a coping mechanism in a sense.
Exactly. Yeah.
Same thing that's happening on the environmental plane right now too, with a lot of people who are just like overcome by existential fears, of impending doom in their minds, and it's just like it can become overwhelming if you think about it too much too. Right. So many things like that are happening that and I think that the lessons here, I guess, is that like how do we just take the next step forward, like, and maybe just the idea of just taking one small step forward is everything, right?
Right.
Because when there's just so many things happening like this, they're just like beyond comprehension, really, beyond our ability to cope with it.
Right.
Like, we have to cope with it, essentially. Mm-hmm. And, like, to take that just one step forward or take action like that, that's huge. Because that, that's the whole thing. We can deal with our own stress, and we can, actually have an impact.
Right.
At the same time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, everybody has their own existential crisis they're dealing with at any given moment, too. In their own personal lives, and on a whole. So, I don't know. Cheers to everybody out there dealing with things,
yes.
It's a lot. It's amazing work that you're doing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It is my sincere hope to go this October. But if it's meant to be, God will make the way. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
If it's not safe, obviously I won't go, because I would be of no help to anybody.
Yeah. You don't want to be in the way either.
Exactly. I had somebody reach out to me and said, I just need to go. I'm a veteran. I just need to go. How can I raise money for people to help me go? And I said, well, first of all, you need to understand, I pay my own way.
Yeah.
I pay my own airfare. I even pay room and board while I'm there.
Yeah, exactly.
I pay room and board so not to be a burden on their economic structure. So I said, I think what you need to do is look into the Peace Corps.
Right. There you go.
Because I can't pay for you to go, and I can't hook you up with anybody over there. Because basically you have no skills other than wanting to help.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But check into the Peace Corps, because maybe they can help you do what you want to do. Really wants to go and help work with the refugees, and I applaud that.
Definitely.
That's what I want to do. But would I be in the way? Somebody's going to have to find a place for me to sleep. Somebody's going to have to find food for me. Somebody's going to have to help me translate. I'm doing more here than what I could do there right now.
And that's the very first thing that you said. First thing you got to do is understand,
Right.
And then if you can look into it and think about it and strategize and find out where you need to place yourself to best help, really.
Right. And right now it's here.
Yeah.
Right now it's here. It's speaking to people. It's letting them know that this is how you can help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every penny counts.
Definitely.
Everything counts. Everything helps. 800 toothbrushes help.
Yeah.
The kids at my church daycare want to collect things. So I gave them a list. Band-Aids, bar soap, underwear, socks, like you said.
Yeah.
When everything you've had is gone, the necessities become very important.
Yeah, yeah. And for people who are completely disconnected from that situation, who are involved in situations where people need food in America even, right?
Right.
Donate there,
Exactly.
You can be a help in your own communities.
I don't think there's a community in the United States that doesn't have a food pantry anymore.
Right. Yeah,
I think every community has a food pantry, and if they don't, they should.
Yeah, definitely. I know we raised a lot of canned foods donations here in Bellevue, just south in town. We had
at the Coyote Grove.
Yeah, Food for Folks Festival.
Food for Folks. Yep.
We do that every year. I always play as Great Grandpa BB, playing guitar and whatever.
Yeah.
They're great people over there. We used to have a more of a canned food drive with our festival in Norwalk. But lately we've just been donating to different nonprofits and things like that.
Wonderful.
But, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've so far we're doing well, but there's going to be a long way to go. There's going to be a recovery period when this is all over.
Yeah.
Now we're trying to meet the immediate needs.
Yeah.
Food, medications, and salaries.
Yeah.
Because all their money's locked up.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're having a hard time paying their staff. So we're trying to cover that through our organization, through donations, and it's been coming in, and it'll hopefully continue to come in.
Keeping everything liquid, keeping everything moving, keeping the gears turning.
Right. Right. Actually, the administrator told me today from the children's home. He said, "We know that we're going to need a lot of money, financial support, but right now our banks aren't safe.
Yeah.
So we can stockpile it here and send it when it needs to go." Like they're in their planting season. They're just a hair ahead of Ohio in their season, because we're on the same latitude and longitude.
Yeah.
Their growing season, their harvest season is a little bit earlier than ours, but they have all these greenhouses that they start their plants in from seeds. They're moving forward.
Yeah, you got to.
You've got to, because you know what? People are going to need to eat when this is all over with.
Yeah, for sure.
And the rest of Europe can't. I mean, Ukraine was the breadbasket. They're continuing to move forward, those that can.
The effects are going to be far-reaching besides just Ukraine then, too.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, the price of wheat. As a farmer's daughter, I understand this.
Yeah.
I mean, we raised wheat and corn and soybeans. For a period of time, we even raised oats. But they have a hybrid wheat over there and a buckwheat that they raise. And it truly was the breadbasket of Europe.
Wow.
So,
yeah. Well, prayers to them, you know. I'm going to post this podcast as soon as I can here.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you all who have been watching or listening. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. I think this is going to, help, spawn some people to take action in their own lives. And there's, people who have a lot of, like we were talking about, a lot of stress or a lot of, anxious energy, that needs to be put to action, essentially.
Right.
These are the directions that you need to go,
Exactly.
Because it'll calm your soul and it'll, help. It'll ultimately
help.
Yeah.
You can't take care of anybody else until you've taken care of yourself.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly.
Yeah.
And two birds with one stone.
Right.
So
right.
to say,
And a drowning man can't save another.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
You really have to take care of yourself.
All the old wisdom coming out right
now. Well, I told you I'm old.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
this has been wonderful.
Thanks for coming on. And cool.
Alrighty.
All right. Yeah.
Thanks.